Yes, there certainly is a very strong contingent of American academic leadership and policy leadership that believes in multilateralism. And I believe that in its finest moments, the United States contributed extremely importantly to multilateralism. I think on this 75th anniversary of the United Nations, we should remember that America's greatest ever president, Franklin Roosevelt, was the political mover and in many ways the political intellectual father of the United Nations as a concept and as a reality. And I believe that the UN Charter and its moral charter, the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights of 1948, which Eleanor Roosevelt did more than any other person to bring to reality, are the two great foundations of multilateralism. There are many people, including myself, that are deeply steeped in that multilateralism. I have spent the last 20 years nonstop working for and with the United Nations and believe profoundly in the UN as a system for peace and for sustainable development and for human rights, and believe on its 75th anniversary, we should rededicate ourselves, especially this generation, to those purposes. So this is why I say this is not beyond hope. It's on the contrary, there is a great part of American intellectual life which sees multilateralism as its core principle. And many of us have fought from the Vietnam War to the wars of the Middle East wholeheartedly and vociferously within our own country, and will continue to champion the UN Charter as the framework for preserving peace. And so I just want to be very clear about that. It's far from hopeless. It is a practical challenge. Some people have been writing in the chat room that I'm being stupid because it's all the U.S. military-industrial complex and so on, or I'm somehow belittling listeners by making it over-personalistic. I'm not. I've been involved in these issues for 40 years and as a U.S. Citizen for a lot longer than that. I am not oversimplifying, and it's not so simple as the U.S. military-industrial complex. It's not so simple as Trump. It is a struggle at all times in changing circumstances to try to hone to a sane, smart, objective course. And that's what we need to do in a new context in 2020.
Is there a danger of Cold War escalating into a hot war? And that was a question that's come from Australia. So, Professor Sachs?
There's always a danger of a hot war. And this is the most important thing to realize. Events can get out of control. We're living in a complex environment with complex systems, where the systems themselves are so complex they're sometimes not understood. The issues do not necessarily come down to decisions by leaders. Terrible blunders, mistakes, accidents can happen. And that's why we have to tone down the rhetoric and tone up the institutionalization of cooperation at all levels. The world came within a second or two of destruction in October 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was one naval officer countermanding the order of another captain of a Soviet submarine that stopped the launch of a 15 kiloton nuclear torpedo that most likely would have set off complete global destruction. Neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev wanted that destruction. They were trying to back off, but actions taken through a series of accidents in the Caribbean, in anti-submarine and submarine warfare by local naval personnel who were not obeying orders, nearly set off thermonuclear war. Everybody should study this reality to understand it. We don't want to live by a tripwire. There are thousands of nuclear warheads, and between China and the United States, we can destroy everything. And these are not fully controlled, rational systems where you can breathe and sleep easily. These are systems that need de-escalation and control. So when you have someone as stupid as Trump, and he is stupid, and he's dangerous, and he's loudmouthed, and he's ignorant, it makes a difference, believe me, because it triggers all sorts of behavior all through bureaucracies, through the public, and so on. And don't misunderstand, that's why this is not a game. That's why Cold Wars are not cold necessarily, even if the leaders want them to be just rhetorical. Terrible things can happen. And so we shouldn't be playing around with this. And the point is that for relations as complex as the issues we're talking about right now on connectivity, online battlefields, autonomous weapons, cyber warfare, plus all of the other issues of a pandemic and all the rest, we need deep institutionalized engagement between countries, not rattling, not tweets and not even, trying to round up allies. It's so stupid what Pompeo is doing right now, traveling around Asia, trying to create an anti-China front. This is mind-bogglingly stupid. We need to talk to each other in detail about the realities that we're facing right now, and please to understand that things can escalate even when no one wants them to escalate. That's the whole history of the last century and a half, how accidents can happen and how things can get out of hand. I think this issue of decoupling is probably most relevant in the digital area, all of the relevant digital technologies, whether it's connectivity, computation, artificial intelligence, and so on. And so we should perhaps focus on that for a moment. First, the value of having global standards in the digital area is proved over the last 50 years. By having global standards, we've greatly accelerated the technological progress and the interoperability, the connectivity, the economies of scale and scope of the digital era. So the idea of creating a decoupled digital world of different camps or lack of interoperability would be an extremely high cost mistake. Now, we don't have full, obviously full connectivity because lots of applications are blocked within China. Lots of applications are increasingly blocked within the United States. And therefore, when the US now advances further attempts to impede China's access to advanced microprocessor chips, for example, there's a kind of fertile ground on which that's taking place. I'm against it because I think it is dangerous, invidious, not by any means the appropriate response to the circumstances, but and mainly I don't want to see our most important sphere of technological advance that can do so much to improve humankind, save the environment, help on health and education and governance and countless other areas, become militarized, divided, and subject to a very divisive Cold War mentality. Now, having said that, we are going to enter more industrial policy by region, almost surely, because every major region will want capacity in various technologies that are near the cutting edge. And so China has industrial policies, the US has industrial policies, Europe will have industrial policies, and that will be part of the lay of the land in this fast-changing digital process. But we ought to have guardrails, understanding, updated rules of the game within the WTO on this new, dramatically dynamic and disruptive area of economic activity. This is the second point that I would say. Yes, there will be industrial policy of major regions. I have no doubt about it. But let's have it under the rules so that we don't lose the benefits of global standards and global interoperability and global connectedness. Then finally, on the issue of blocks, to a huge extent, China needs to be very proactive in preventing this also. Now, again, despite what some people are saying in the chat room about my naivete, you're open to your claims, but I think there will be a big difference with Trump out of office. Of course, I'm going to be engaged in my own struggles in that case to help make a more progressive and multilateral view within any administration that comes to power, because nothing's simple, ever. We will have fights ahead and arguments ahead. But in any event, Trump actually made a lot of progress in getting other countries to buy into this U.S. hard line. Just yesterday, Italy, of all countries, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, said we're not going to have Huawei in the system. And there are many reasons for this. These countries are dependent on the U.S. militarily. They're afraid of the U.S., but they also need more assurance from China. A lot of China's neighbors are just afraid merely of the fact that China's a giant compared to the neighbors. And so there is a sense, my God, where is our security? And so China as a giant, as a superpower, needs also to build constantly that confidence of other countries as well. It goes with the territory. And I think I'm a big believer, for example, in RCEP, RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is currently 15 countries, the 10 ASEAN countries, plus China, Japan, Korea, plus Australia, New Zealand. I think China should very proactively promote RCEP as a diplomatic venture to build confidence within the Asia-Pacific region. Because China needs to build confidence also. It's a powerhouse, irrespective of the U.S. Put aside the whole U.S. question, just China's relations with other countries. China needs to build that kind of confidence. So I think that this will be an ongoing issue, but the bottom line is decoupling is possible, but profoundly unadvisable. And we need to, therefore, establish proper rules for a new technological age, which is not the rules of WTO 1994.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, we have so many questions. I do want to give our two speakers the opportunity to make some concluding remarks. So what I'll do is I'll just mention just a few of the other questions that have been sent in, and then I'll invite each to give their final remarks. So we've talked a bit about the US presidential election. What is the significance of the US presidential election for US-China relations? And what do US and Chinese governments need to do in order to reverse the drive towards confrontation? Perhaps we've covered these, but maybe you might want to say more. And there's a question on the pandemic. To what extent has the pandemic affected US-China relations? And there's an interesting one as well. In what ways is the rest of the world affected by deteriorating US-China relations? And what role can other countries play in helping to improve the situation? That's a question from the Philippines, interestingly. So please, our two speakers, if you wish to respond to any other points that have been raised during the course of the discussion, or you want to address any of those questions, or you just want to make some final comments, can I ask you to do so? So can we go with Professor Sachs, please, first?
Great. Well, first to say thank you for a wonderful discussion and for organizing this, and for participants from all over the world. I'm most appreciative. We need to end the pandemic urgently. China has shown that you can suppress the pandemic successfully. Other countries in the Asia Pacific similarly have shown this is possible. The US, Europe, and Latin America need really to learn some lessons from this because it has been running out of control because of poor leadership and poor techniques of public health management. 2021 could be, I'm hoping it will be, a very constructive year, moving past the pandemic, getting it under control with, I hope, new vaccines that come online, but then several important global events in 2021. COP15 on the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP26 on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Climate Agreement, a World Food Summit. I would think that the best way to encourage what we're both calling for is to work together in a highly professional and systematic way towards the success of those multilateral objectives. Because by working together on a goal-based way, we can establish all of the win-win opportunities that both of us see as so important. Thank you very much for the chance to join today. I think the one point that I would immediately make on your remarks is that we can't really talk about China says this and the US says this and the US needs this and so on, because the US is very divided itself. And my view is that Trump is the worst president in American history and the most dangerous president that we've had in American history. He certainly doesn't represent most Americans on anything. And the issue really on the tensions and the trade and so forth is that a lot of it is in the hands of very few people. Almost everything, I would say everything that Trump has done on trade or trade war with China or other actions on China have been by executive decree or emergency powers under US law, not even by legislation. So they hardly have been debated publicly, understood publicly, or do they reflect in any broad and deep way any views of United States citizens on this. There probably aren't deep views among most of the citizenry because, unfortunately, issues like these are complex. They require historical knowledge. They require a lot of discussion and dialogue. It helps, of course, when we have personal relations and experience. It's been my pleasure and honor and education to visit China almost every year for dozens of years. My first trip was 40 years ago, and I've been coming many times a year for most years for the last 30 years. So it makes a big difference to have these contacts. And unfortunately, even though we live in a connected age, we don't have the personal contacts as much as we need for an interconnected world to have the depth of understanding, personal relations, sense of each other's perspectives and history, and therefore views are easily manipulated on all sides, and they're subject to crazy ideas, propaganda, cultural memes, and in the U.S. context, to a absolutely terrible president in the last 4 years who's really a xenophobic, racist, and idiot, in my view. Sorry to use the language, but he's just not knowledgeable about almost anything. And because of that, we have really a dangerous situation. I think, and I hope, but nobody can be sure, that it will be less dangerous after the election on November 3rd, if the votes are counted properly and if we don't have some disorder in the United States. I'm counting on us having a new president and a chance for a fresh start on these issues. Not that things will be entirely easy, because the anti-China sentiment runs relatively high in elite mainstream media circles right now, partly because Trump makes it that way, partly, as you say, because there is a strain of American thinking that is conducive to this kind of idea. It's got two elements, I would say, that are conjoined historically. One is and you touched on it, a longstanding Protestant evangelical vision of America by U.S. People. And I apologize, people on the chat are saying don't use American because that means all of the Americas, but I have to use shorthand just for the English language. So excuse me to all my friends in the Americas, and especially in Latin America. I'm going to say America, but I mean the United States of America, just for shorthand. But there is a Protestant evangelical strain throughout American history that says this is a God backed country, and it is the providential authority of Americans to spread out across the North American continent, and then later to have global leadership. And this is a cultural, even religious kind of view. And that has been linked to another deep idea of American foreign policy for the last 75 years, really 70 years, I would say. And that is the United States as the dominant world power, first fighting against Soviet communism in the way that it was expressed. You mentioned George Kennan and containment, and then for other purposes, but a deep American foreign policy idea that the U.S. should be the state with the dominant military power and economic power. And of course, China's rise has called that into question. And you put these two strains of thinking together, and it's created a lot of elite anxiety in the United States that, oh my God, there's a major challenge to American primacy. And because of the cultural, religious overtones that are added to this, one adds a lot of other adjectives about China to this discourse, and it gets fairly widespread play. And the tone against China has been, therefore, increasingly more and more negative during the Trump period. Now, Trump himself represents a particular political base of the evangelical white Protestant population, and the perfect exemplar of that is Pompeo, the Secretary of State, whom I regard as the worst Secretary of State we've ever had, of the worst president we've ever had. But Pompeo himself is an evangelical Protestant who surely believes and states the God-given backing of America, and he is on a crusade, and it's a very dangerous one. And he's traveling around Asia trying to mobilize support for U.S. hegemony or leadership or primacy or whatever term one wants. So this is a very particular political constellation that is the worst that we have to offer. Now, let me move beyond that, though, and just try to put the issues into what I hope is some broader and constructive perspective. We are, in my opinion, and I've been writing about this for many, many years, at the end of the American dominant period. And that is a certain kind of also mechanical implication, if you will, of the declining share of the U.S. in the world economy or in other dimensions of global economics, finance, geopolitics, technological leadership, and so forth. The U.S. really was dominant in many ways, politically, militarily, technologically in 1950, in ways that it is no longer today. And China's rise over the last 40 years is, of course, the most important geopolitical event that has changed this, but not the only one, because there have been many, many countries that have advanced tremendously in technological capacity and strongly in the Asia-Pacific region, especially in East Asia. So China is not the only country, but it's by far the biggest and most consequential of this sort. So we are geopolitically in a new era. It is an era in which no country can lead and no country should lead. It's an era where we need cooperation. As you said, we need multilateralism because no single country can be a dominant leader. And the idea at this stage of having blocks of countries is only profound, mistaken simplification to the complexities that we face right now. The idea of a new Cold War that divides two blocks of nations is a kind of insanity and an invitation to mutual destruction rather than to solving the problems that we face. So what do we need to do to achieve truly a multilateral, constructive approach? That, I think, is the most important challenge that we face in true foreign policy in the future. And I would say in this regard, it is, of course, partly the United States elite understanding that the days of the 1950s arguably are over. We need a very different kind of approach. We need to understand that unlike the historical episode where, with all complexity respected, the British Empire in a way was followed by the American Empire, this is not a situation in which the US empire will be followed by a China empire or by any other hegemonic power, but by a multilateral system under rules of the game that stop us from killing each other and enable us to cooperate on crucial areas such as fighting climate change or protecting biodiversity or ending poverty, or as we face in the current moment, fighting a devastating pandemic disease. So we have to understand first, what is it that we're moving towards? It's not a China-led world. It's not an America-led world. It must not be a two-block world that's insane. It needs to be a multilateral, rule-based world where we can gain the benefits of cooperation. And there, I think there's real work to do. It's not easy to do this. And as the two leading economies and the two most powerful countries, the United States and China, are going to need extra care and extra institutionalized connections with each other, and more cultural and intellectual exchanges, just exactly as the one we're having right now, in order to get this right, because these issues are not simple and they are not at the core of our daily lives. And there are hardliners on all sides, and we need to talk down the hardliners in the United States and vote them out of office. But similarly, in China and elsewhere, hardline nationalist views would be devastating in a period when we need a multilateral understanding. So what is it going to take on multilateralism? First, the world has agreed in a fragile way, but it has agreed to certain basic approaches for the future, most importantly, sustainable development. That's embodied in the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in September 2015 and in the Paris Climate Agreement adopted at the end of 2015. The most important practical step for multilateralism is that we follow through on things that we have agreed, because the world unanimously, by that I mean all 193 UN member states, agreed to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and the Paris Climate Agreement because we need those agreements. Similarly, the world agreed to the Convention on Biological Diversity because we're destroying biodiversity. So what we need is a global politics of seriousness to address the challenges that we have realized are so significant that even all governments agreed to do something about them. But I can note that there is a lack of serious follow-through in general to commitments that we've made, and all of our countries fall short on that. Now, importantly, President Xi at the UN General Assembly in September made a very, very consequential announcement when he said that China is committed to reaching net zero emissions on carbon by 2060. This is a great breakthrough. And Europe previously had made an even bolder commitment to net zero emissions by 2050. When President Biden is in office, I count on him to make a similar commitment to net zero emissions of the United States by 2050. Then I think we need a deep institutionalization of this so that China, Europe, the US, and other countries work together seriously with real professional engineering studies, real detailed plans, not just tweets. And God forbid, if we could just get presidents to stop tweeting, this would be the first advance of multilateralism and international relations. Twitter is awful in this regard. One should never do foreign policy by Twitter. It's insane to try to put complex issues into 140 characters, and it could blow up the world by misunderstandings. So we need to institutionalize the fight against climate change human-induced climate change. Similarly, China will host COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity this coming year in Kunming. This should be a breakthrough to save biodiversity from human destruction. And China has a real opportunity to help lead the world in a deep multilateral system. And China's really good at systems, really good at bureaucracy, but in the positive, rational sense. To say we have a system to protect biodiversity. China's done some very important initiatives on geographic redlining to protect endangered regions. And this could be institutionalized globally. The third area that I would point out, and it's really the one that triggered a xenophobic reaction in the United States, is the advanced technologies around artificial intelligence and digital, for example, 5G and Huawei. And the problem here is that we're in the midst of a dramatic technological revolution that could be of wonderful benefit for humanity, but we have no rules of the game around it right now. It's a kind of lawless environment, and we don't even know what kind of surveillance is really being done. We don't know how data are really being used. I have no idea what Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on does with my personal data, but I don't like that I don't know. And
Professor Sachs.
I'll finish in just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry to run on. But just to say, this is what triggered the heated response from the US, was the sense that China had caught up and was getting ahead in a militarily highly relevant technology of machine learning, artificial intelligence, autonomous weapons, 5G, China's ahead, and so on. And that is really what triggered the, I would say, a paranoid and racist and evangelical crusader response. But it was this sense of China made in 2025. Oh my God, they're ahead of us. What are we going to do? But not on a commercial basis per se, but on a security basis. So it's a sense of vulnerability. But the truth is, we don't have rules of the game right now. And we need to put artificial intelligence and autonomous battlefields and all sorts of other horribly threatening cyber warfare technologies under diplomatic negotiating frameworks, as we did with nuclear weapons, not perfectly, but at least, for God's sake, we got them under some kind of legal regimen so that we reduce the chance of us blowing ourselves up. Well, cyber warfare and all that comes with it is incredibly dangerous, and we need rules of the game to move forward. Let me just end by saying one basic point. This session today, I very much value it. I'm sorry to have run on too long, but I'm really grateful there are 400 participants from all over the world participating. We need to figure out how to have this kind of dialogue in a rich and deep way. The biggest risk is people who know nothing having power, because when they do, they can blow us all up. And when we have the connections, the knowledge, the in-depth discussions, the institutional and cultural connections, we will not only survive, we will thrive. Thank you very much.
Tell me more about what exactly is China's modernization. What you saw there would help us to understand what exactly it is.
Thank you very much. I was lucky to watch the modernization close up because I first visited China in 1981, which was just the start of the fast growth period. We didn't know it then. And of course, I've come many times a year, most years ever since then. So from 1981 until today, I watched. In the early 2000s, I was asked by the government officials also to look at the challenges of Western China. So I saw this firsthand. What I saw was a country that went from poverty to prosperity, poverty to wealth in this 40 years. It is a most amazing story. It's a most amazing accomplishment. It is, I believe, also the guideposts for what will help Africa in its next 40-year journey to accomplish a similar task, which is ending extreme poverty. I think that there are three big challenges right now in the world in which China is right at the center. The first is the ecological challenge. We know that we have to have a different kind of energy system, a different kind of industry, because the kind that we have based on fossil fuels has led us to really the precipice of extreme environmental damage and danger. So transformation is number one. The second big issue is China, through the Belt and Road Initiative, has recognized quite deeply, and also through the Global Development Initiative recently, that China's future is inextricably linked with development throughout the world. This is right. China will be a major exporter to the developing countries. China will be a major provider of financing for those countries. China will be a major builder of the infrastructure throughout the world. So this is the second big challenge. And the third big challenge is, unfortunately, China's success triggered an adverse reaction in the United States. I think a completely wrong-headed and dangerous one. But American strategists have come to see China as a threat to American primacy. Oh, well, I tell them, so what? This is not a matter of primacy. This is a matter of global well-being and global cooperation. Stop thinking in win-lose terms. But unfortunately, this relationship is now fraught with problems, and it is really important that the U.S. and China find a path to cooperation. Yes, I think the question is, first of all, to move beyond the conventional measurements. So I would like to know about the clean air, the low carbon, the longevity of healthy lives, and so forth. I think that this is what the common prosperity idea in China is really about. And I think for all our economies, we're going to have to get past some of our hang-ups with the current measurements, which have led us to a very dirty, rather unequal, and not so happy quality of life. Let me just point out that in the United States, we get richer and richer, and life expectancy continues to decline now. We're back to life expectancy of 25 years ago. This is dreadful. The population is sick. It's being poisoned by bad diets. It's not being measured properly. So I would like to see all of our economies, but since China is so good at this, about thinking at about the future, to think about what really matters for the quality of life, for the distribution of the goods and services that we need, for the protection of the environment, but also I think it's inevitable. China's so big and so influential in the world that China is going to be a leader globally of this new direction. That's a good thing. I think the Belt and Road Initiative, in my personal view, should be expanded. I know there's some skepticism, but it's a terrific initiative, and it should actually be expanded because we need to build out a high quality of life infrastructure for the 21st century, and I think the Belt and Road Initiative can really help to do that. One of the reasons why this is so complicated is that we are at the end of the Western-led world economy, so we're really into something new, and that's also what Professor Singh was emphasizing. For 250 years, all the yardsticks came from Britain or the United States or the so-called Western world. That was always
a historical anomaly, because for almost all of human history, it's been India and China and Asia that was the pace setter for Europe, not the other way around. And now we're in a very exciting world, I think. Dangerous, yes, but exciting in that we are no longer in a Western-led world. We're in a multipolar world. And I was very happy to hear Professor Singh talk about this reaching for the cultural base of well-being in different civilizations, because we're really seeing a lot of that discussion emerging. Of course, China has announced, and I think it's very exciting, a global civilizations initiative, and President Xi has spoken about the need to look to the cultural history of China itself for China's strength. And I'm seeing that in India, of course, and other parts of the world. Now, put that together with the environmental challenges, with the inequalities, with the rapid changes of technology, especially the digital technologies. We're in a period of disruption. Mm-hmm. We need to keep everything peaceful. This is the most important fact. The West, the United States, not such a peaceful country, unfortunately. It has to learn to be more peaceful, which is something that really is urgent right now. But we're in a period of change, and China's just going to play a huge role in that, and asking for a clear prediction can't be done in the same way as, say, 40 years ago was catching up. This is not about catching up anymore. This is about figuring out a way to live well in the 21st century. Yeah.
Greetings, I'm Jeff Sachs. I'm president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and co-chair of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. And it's a great pleasure and honor to join you today, albeit by video, but you can see I'm in a spectacular place in Western Saudi Arabia, in the Hejaz region in Al Ula. And you can also see it's very sunny, and this is a solar superpower. And it's a fitting place for me to say a few words for this important session. I want to thank GuideCo, an organization that I admire tremendously, for bringing us together and for the new report today on Pathways to 2030. And I want to thank all of the partner institutions, the UN regional agencies, OLADE, and others for your leadership. We really have a team effort, and we really need a team effort. I'm especially gratified that we are today with many regional organizations, many of the UN regional bodies, and also with GuideCo, which is about energy interconnection. One of the lessons of renewable energy or zero carbon energy systems is that this must be done at a regional scale at a minimum. Of course, GuideCo's vision is a globally interconnected energy system, and I hope we work towards that and achieve that. But at a minimum, we need regional integration. That's OLADE's mission in Latin America. It is the mission of ECLAC or CEPAL. It is the mission of ESQA for Western Asia. It is the mission of UNECE. It is the mission of ESCAP. It is the mission of UNECA. And it is completely a focus for Secretary General Guterres, as all of you know very, very well. The Council of Engineers of the Energy Transition, which is a body of wonderful engineers from around the world working together towards practical engineering solutions for deep decarbonization and net zero by 2050, met with Secretary General just a couple of days ago. And Secretary General emphasized the need for regional solutions and called on a seat together with all of you
with the regional bodies, with the multilateral development banks, with GuideCo, with OLADE, with other partners to work on regional solutions in each of the main UN regional groupings for Latin America, for Africa, for Western Asia, for Europe, for the Asia Pacific. Please count on me, count on SDSN, count on SEAT, the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition, to partner with you. And let's make sure that we work together. GuideCo has given us some very important blueprints, actually for every region of the world, of what an interconnected zero carbon grid can look like. And we know that zero carbon electricity is at the core of decarbonization, because not only does it clean the energy sector, the electricity sector itself, it also enables zero emission transport. It enables zero emission buildings, both commercial and residential. It enables zero carbon hydrogen produced through hydrolyzers using zero carbon electricity. And it enables zero carbon industry, whether directly through electrification or through hydrogen or similar fuel carriers that are themselves zero carbon. One of the points that we are working on very intensively at SDSN and SEAT is financing the pathways in each region. Without practical financing, we can make great plans, but we will not succeed. We know that if long-term, low-cost finance is available, these zero-carbon solutions are actually at parity or even better than the fossil fuel solutions. But they are capital-intensive. They require a tremendous amount of finance. And the market-based financing is not adequate by itself. That's why Secretary General Guterres has called for an SDG stimulus. That's why almost every day I get to say what I'm about to say, and that is we need to scale up the multilateral development banks by factor 5 or more so that they're really doing their job. Because today, if you add up all the multilateral development banks, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and others, the total lending per year is only 100 to 150 billion. It should be at least $500 billion, but really verging on $1 trillion a year. This means a massive scale up. So let me conclude here by saying that with GuideCo, with the regional UN bodies, with the engineers, we can make the pathways to net zero by 2050. This is technologically feasible. It's economically feasible. It makes complete sense for the planet. It needs to be merged with practical financing and implementation plans. And I really hope that for each one of the UN regions, for Latin America, West Africa, Western Asia, Africa, Europe, Asia and the Pacific, that we can make a practical plan of action, a pathway to 2050, together with the technological paths and the financial paths. And I know that GuideCo and the report today will give us crucial knowledge of how to do that. So let me close by thanking all of you. Thanks to GuideCo for bringing us together. Thank you for the report today, and let us work as hard and intensively as we can up to the G20 meeting in September, the UN Mid-SDG Summit in September, and COP28 in the Emirates at the end of November and beginning December, so that we really get in place these financed pathways to net zero by mid-century. Thank you so much.